Hey, whoa. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Is there anybody out there? Out there in TV land? Behind the glass? Behind the glass? Wow, welcome to the very first episode of Sound and Form. I am your host, Gaura Vani. Since this is brand new, I don't have any theme music yet, so, or like a fancy video or anything. So here, we'll try this for now. All right, woohoo! Got my trusty band, the house band over here. So, sound and form. Today's episode is called Astrology, Science, or Fraud. And it is going to be a conversation with two friends of mine. Before I bring on my buddy Jagai, who's kind of co-hosting today's episode, let me just say a couple things since this is like our kickoff. I've had this idea for a long time of doing a podcast, and all my incredible friends are doing these great podcasts. Namras and the Late Morning Program, and Kostuba and Raghunath with, Wisdom of the Sages, and then you got the Honest Man podcast. There's like so many wonderful podcasts. So it's like, why do we need another podcast out there? I have always been fascinated about the place where the material and the spiritual intersect. And I feel like that point is like where we can witness something more than ourselves, something greater. So the idea of that intersection point and all the questions that come from that, the curiosities, do miracles really exist? What is, the science of love? Like, is love a mental construct? Is it real? All these things about the meeting place between the sacred and the profane. So these are the questions that fuel this idea of sound and form. And it comes from the Sanskrit term Vani and Vapu. And the basic idea is, if you're too attached to the material reality, the physical form, and you miss the essence of the thing, then are you really getting anything from your experience, whether it's with a spiritual teacher or whether it's just with your own life? So sound and form is asking us to find that deeper connection to the divine in everything we do. So thanks so much for joining us. This beautiful journey is kicking off. So enough of me. Let me bring in my super awesome old friend, Jagai Nitai.
Who are you calling old?
You? I mean, who's got the gray pirate beard? It's not me, I'll tell you that.
I got to do something now that I'm 50.
So,
John, so blessed to be here. How do you
call? Man. Such a pleasure to have you. So I'm
the first guest of your first episode.
It's all.
Let's see if you have me back.
It's all downhill from here after we got Jagai. Let me I know you're doing this TikTok thing. Tell me about your cool TikTok adventure.
Sure. So I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. Well, let me roll it back. I don't really do social media. You could look at my Facebook. I only have a few hundred followers.
Is it because you're old? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just joking. I say that for myself because it's like my kids are into social media and it's like, oh my God, another social media platform.
I was tired of looking at people's babies and stuff. So I kind of deleted all my friends. And so my son, 15 years old this year, he was sending me TikTok videos like, Dad, watch this. Dad, check this out. Dad, so I had to download. Sydney sends some love. I had to download TikTok. So I'm watching TikTok videos with my son. And one afternoon, Narayan says, one afternoon, I decided to post one video for fun, just reading a Bhagavad Gita verse, and the thing blew up. I had 2 followers, and now I'm almost at 10,000.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know. I don't know why. I think it's kind of the novelty of having like an old white dude with tattoos reading Bhagavad Gita.
I've seen some of your episodes. I think it's because you love the Bhagavad Gita so much.
Maybe. I do have a great affinity for the Bhagavad Gita. It bothers me tremendously when I watch debates about religion and atheism, and the Gita or even any Vedic philosophy never is on the table. It's always Abrahamic faiths. And it's like, those are easy to defeat. Like, what about the soul? What about Brahman? What about Virat Rupa? What about the time scale from the Vedic culture? Like, why is any of that never a thing when you hear debates between religion and atheism or God? It's never there. So I try to bring in a lot of energy into those into the podcasts, into the TikToks. And so, yeah, check me out on TikTok. It's kind of fun.
Very
a lot
cool.
of comments kind of go off. But anyways, thank you, Gaura. This is about you and your new podcast.
No, it's great. I am so grateful that you're here, and you actually brought this to life by pushing me to do this. I would have never done it without you and without our guest today. So today's conversation is astrology, science, or fraud. So we have an astrologer who's a good friend of mine, Dr. Radhikesh. So tell me about that, Jagai. Like, do you believe in astrology? You're Mr. Vedic guy on TikTok.
I'm on the fence, honestly. Some of me thinks it's BS. Some of me thinks it's true. So I used to be pretty good friends with Sariputta. Remember Sariputta?
Yeah.
Brilliant PhD in statistical mathematics from Cornell University. And he wrote that book, Vedic Cosmology. Now, I drank that thing up. I've read it a few times. I love it. The videos, everything. So there's the Vedic Cosmology. Then when I was a young man in my 20s, I had my chart done by a really professional, like top level astrologer. And
where was that? That was in India?
No, it was in LA. There was an LA. A guy came through, and there's a few things in there which are eerie. So it's just me now. Did I?
Well, I just figured you're talking such interesting stuff. We may as well.
Oh, okay. So for example, now I was probably 19 when I got this chart done, and it said, when you get into your later life, retirement. Now, retirement from the Bhagavatam's point of view is over 50. Okay. He said, you will be an author and your works will be all over the world. And I've been thinking about that for 30 years. Who would know that now, today, I mean, I just posted a couple of videos. I had, I don't know, altogether, maybe 8,000 or 9,000 views and 10,000 followers. I would never have conceived such a thing. But that was in my chart from 30 years ago. How is it coincidence? Maybe. And then, it talked about my wealth and how I was going to make money, which came true. And then one more thing, which I'm not going to say, I'm sure Dr. Radhakrishna can hear this, but Radhikesh, I'm sorry. I got a divorce, and my chart picked the day, exactly the day, and I didn't even know until years later when I found my chart in a pile of stuff, and I went through it, and then it gave the days that I would go through transitions. The very day that I got a divorce and my wife and I split, it said it in my chart. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know 5 years later when I was going through some gear that I saw it. So that's one side. The other side, come on, it couldn't be true.
Really, some of the questions you threw my way were, how come I can't get the numbers from the lottery printed by my
how come two astrologers do one chart for one person? They're not the same. Or like, I know somebody that got their charts done with like top shelf Vedic astrologer in India. And like 5 days later, they died in a car wreck.
Oops, I missed that part.
Yeah. And in 5 days, you'll be dead.
Well, maybe the guy just didn't want to tell him. I mean, like our family, right? You won't pay me. It says here you won't pay me.
Yeah.
I remember when our kids were born, we had their charts done. It's like a very traditional thing, you know, to kind of like almost like a blessing, because you know traditionally astrologers are like priests and wise men and brahmanas, and they bring in the blessings of their wisdom and knowledge, and by consulting them, you know, at the time of birth, it like brings the child into the samskaras and the traditions of the culture, you know.
Yeah. And it helps you guide them. I mean, if you're a Brahmin family and you have a child that's very Brahminical chart, you're like, oh, this is a Brahminical child, and we're going to teach them. But what if you have a child that's very like Vaishya and they're into money and business, but you're trying to push them into a way? So yeah, those kind of things make sense. But but like, for example, I know a couple of times where parents didn't want their kids to marry somebody else, and they told the astrologer, give them a bad chart. And so then they came up with a bad chart, and the kids were like, oh. And then they didn't get married.
My kids and Brenda have been watching from time to time this show called Indian Matchmaker or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's really funny.
There's so many wild things, you know, reading someone's palm, reading the shape of their head, and going, no, this is not the guy for you.
Yeah, I knew a very cute couple. They were here in Laguna. They were eating lunch at my house. And later, the girl, who was a dear friend of mine, she said, oh, I really like this boy. I hope we can get together. She hadn't been married. She was in her 30s. He's in his 30s. They were a perfect couple. And then later I saw him and I said, so, you know, she really likes you. What's going on? And he's like, well, I want to get the charts done. He got the charts done and they were no good. And so he didn't continue. And she was heartbroken. And I was like, really?
So, okay. So, yeah, right. Okay.
All right. Another astrologer then.
Okay. But then on the other side, and maybe we can kind of wrap with this, on the other side, and this is the connection to this particular show, Sound and Form. On the other side, it's a Vedic science.
Yes. On the other side, then there's the cosmography, which is exact. And from it,
like so mathematical that these calculations of the universe are the map of time itself, you know.
And they're very close to modern science, which is weird. And so
say more about that for a second.
Well, okay, so well,
like, in other words, this knowledge is from thousands of years ago.
Okay, so the Vedic cosmography has been part of the Vedic canon of literature since forever.
Right.
And anytime there's any kind of event in the Vedic canon of books, they write the time, but based on the position of the stars. And so, for example, the very beginning of Kali Yuga, which was February 18th, 5,123 years ago, something, I think that was it. The very day of Kali Yuga, they wrote down what they saw in the sky, the position of all the stars. Well, there's, and I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but there are calculations that, or observations that they did, that they wrote down, that there would be no way that they would have known how to get those unless they were sitting there observing it. Means you couldn't have gone back and rewritten it in. Like, we want to make this seem like it was 5,000 years ago. So we're going to put...
Because basically modern science can calculate backwards the exact position of the stars and the planets. Like,
yes, but you have to calculate into it. So quickly, the Earth spins on its axis, right? And on that axis, we see the North Star, right? The North Pole Star. Well, what we didn't know, but was a few hundred years ago, that the Earth also wobbles like this.
And so they didn't know that until recently.
Yeah. One wobble takes 13,000 years for the Earth. So if today's North Pole, in 13,000 years, it'll come back to the same North Pole. But in 1,000 years, it'll be a different star. In 1,000 years, a different North Pole. In 1,000 years. So back in the time when they wrote down what the North Pole is, it's a different North Pole than it is now. Not North Pole, I mean pole star.
Pole star.
It is now. And that pole star, if you do the calculations, it's about 4,000 years it took for the Earth to make one wobble to aim at that pole star. How the hell would they have known that? They couldn't have known that. The only way they would have known that is they observed it.
All right. Okay. So
it's
cool,
technical.
super cool stuff. This is why we love you. This is why you're the man. You know, you're so much more of a scholar than me. All right. So hang on one second. Let's quickly introduce our guest today. The whole reason why we've gathered today is our friend, Dr. Radhikesh. So he's got a doctorate of medicine from Wright State University, 20 years of private practice, CEO of a practice, grandfather, great-grandfather, all have been Ayurvedic doctors and astrologers. And since 2012, he's been like chugging away at astrology. So without further ado, let's bring in Dr. Radhikesh.
Good morning.
Good morning. Huddy Bull. How are you? So nice to see you.
My pleasure to be on your show.
So what the heck? Let's just dive right in here. Is it a science or is it a fraud? Has the whole thing been lost? I mean, that's really, you know, other than the clickbait title, the real question is, has the science of astrology really been lost? I mean, even though, yes, we may accept there are these ancient sciences like that built Machu Picchu and, you know, like that mapped the Amazon and stuff like that. But the question is like, is it really alive in this day and age, or has it been lost?
Can you pause for a second? I think the first question, which is just an intro question, and then Gaura's question is number one.
Okay.
What is Vedic astrology? And, you know, I know that people think astrology and Western astrology is something completely different. What is your, you know, 5 lines of Vedic astrology?
Sure. So Vedic astrology is just that. It's a science, like everything else that's out there, like mathematics and physics and chemistry. It's a science. So as a science, has reproducible results. It has laws that need to be followed. It has, because it's Vedic, it has this ancient basis in the Vedas, as you mentioned, Jagai. You know, so it's basically a science, but it's a subtle science. So just like we use, you know, medicine to figure out, you know, about our diabetes or blood pressure, or science of nutrition to see what we should eat. You know, when we have subtle difficulties, obstacles in our life, we need clarity about things, we're going through a problem, we turn to astrology, because what astrology does, it looks at subtle energies, subtle entities, like all these planetary beings we talk about, Saturn and Rahu and all of these, and I'm sure we'll get into it more. These are all personalities which are there to help us in our life. We're all kind of following our path of spiritual evolution. And what they do is they're bringing karma into our life and helping us grow. So
okay, wait. Just a question. You said personality. You said they're personalities.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Okay. So all of these, everything in our spiritual life is personal. We're all individual beings. You know, God is an individual person who's known by so many different names. He has qualities. He has things he likes and he doesn't like. Same with us. We're all the same way. And these kind of in-between beings, we call them demigods, you know, elevated spiritual personalities. They're actually designated to bring different karmas into our life to help us grow spiritually.
So wait. Before you go further, just to be clear about this, and obviously some of us who are more familiar with Vedic thought may be more comfortable with this, but for folks who haven't heard this before, you're calling them people. So you're saying that the planets are kind of people?
I think that's one way of, I think that's a good way of using that word. But spiritual personalities, like demigods, that type of thing, they have a physical manifestation as a planet, but then they also have a more subtle spiritual manifestation. Yes.
Interesting.
So I know that in the Vedic idea, and I know this is true in a lot of cultures, kind of everything in the universe, every energy in the universe is personalized.
That's right.
Sometimes they're called devatas, sometimes they're called demigods. But the idea is that just like we may appear from the perspective of an ant to be just so out of the realm of anything like imaginable, from the ant's perspective, it's like, like I was thinking about this one day. It's like I'm gardening outside and then I had to go pick up my son and I was like messing with the ants and I thought I like put the tool down and I get up and I walk away and I go to my car and the ant goes home and tells people like, you won't believe what happened to me today. This gigantic metal vessel, that was, it was scooping the earth and destroying everything around me. And then this gigantic creature was crushing everything. And then he moved into a spaceship and flew away. Right? It's like,
That's
from
right.
the ant's perspective, we're these cosmic beings, right?
It's the same type of thing. There's a divine energy that pervades this universe and every other universe, and we're all connected to it at different levels. And as we tap into that energy, as we tap into that subtle spiritual energy, and we become more aware that there are other influences in our life beyond what we see, that's where, this science of astrology can be very helpful. Just like, we need some medicine, we go to the doctor and they understand the different medicines. Same with astrology, different blocks and obstacles in our life. There's times when things are going really well and we don't have to put much effort into it. And there's times, no matter what we do, nothing works out. These are all these subtle planetary energies. And if we can understand who they are and what they're doing, we can actually use those to our advantage. If, Saturn is causing some difficulty in our life, well, there's some things we can do to minimize that. Just like if we have a health problem, you have high blood pressure, okay, watch your diet, do some exercise, it'll get better. It's the same thing with all these subtle things going on in our life.
So the skeptic in me pops up a flag, and I think,
sure.
If what you're saying, you're saying it's a science, and you have a process to collect some kind of information from me. Let's say, for example, me. Something crappy's happening. I ask the astrologer and he does some stuff and then he says it's because of the negative influence of this planet, this planet, and this planet. So is that reproducible? Means if I went to another astrologer of the same qualities as you, or let's say the two greatest astrologers in the world, would they come up with the same chart and the same prescription?
That's a very good question. So if you went to two of the greatest doctors in the world with the same, symptoms, would they both come up with the same diagnosis? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So astrology is far more complex than medicine. It has many subtleties to it. So yes, they may come up with the same things, but they may, based on their judgment, see something different. It's just like when you go to two different doctors or three different doctors, they give you different diagnosis for the same thing. So, yeah, or they may give you the same thing. They both may agree, oh yeah, this is what's going on. This is what we need to treat. It's the same way with astrology. More than likely, you'll get the same thing, but you may get a different opinion from different people.
I see. And so then what about, the other question, like major life events, like why can't you predict when I'm going to die?
Astrology can predict when somebody is going to die. When people ask me that question, I will answer it for them. But a lot of people don't want to know. But astrology can certainly predict that.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to know? Or are we going to find out here? Can you just go ahead and read Jagai's chart and tell us when you're going to die?
Yeah, we'll do yours.
Okay. So go ahead, Gaura.
Well, no, I just thought you had a couple of verses that you wanted to share from scripture. Can we look at some of those right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just want to show the, this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is an ancient scripture where, there's a whole story behind it. But this is basically, I wanted to share this verse just showing that astrology has been, present since basically the beginning of time in many ways. So if we could just go down to the translation, this is where I wanted to show this. Actually, one little bit further down in the purport. So this is at the time of the birth of Maharaj Parikshit. Parikshit was the grandson of the Pandavas, of Arjuna, if anybody knows who that is.
Right, the hero of the Mahabharata, one of the heroes of the Mahabharata.
Exactly.
The Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna on the battlefield. Krishna was his chariot driver. So this is the grandson of Arjuna, one of the only survivors of the epic Mahabharata war.
And so this is when he was being born. This chapter is about his birth, and this is the first place where Srila Prabhupada talks about, one of the places where he talks about astrology. And the first line is very powerful, or the first sentence. Astronomical calculations of stellar influences of a living being are not suppositions, but are factual. And the next line, every living being is controlled by the laws of nature at every minute. So basically, a lot of these subtle things are affecting us. It shows that we don't have as much control over things as we think. And a lot of things just happen in our life, and we may look back 5 years later and be like, why the heck did I do that? But at that time it made perfect sense. And these are these astrological influences. And,
so this is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, and let's see the translation. It says, Srimad Bhagavatam is one of the key ancient literatures studied today by, Hindu scholars and Vaishnavas and Sanskrit scholars all over. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, so this is the descendant of the descendant of the descendant of Pandu,
right,
who would be exactly like him in prowess, took birth.
So this is what it's showing, that he was born at the perfect time where all the planetary alignments were perfect for the qualities he's meant to have. Because all of these energies, all of these subtle beings, all of these planets, they're bringing these energies into our life. They're allowing certain things to manifest.
But it also says every action produces another reaction, which is binding, judged by higher authorities, the agents of the Lord. But those who are acting on behalf of Vishnu are not bound by reactions. So that's a question that a lot of people bring up, people who are faithful people who feel themselves to be spiritual, is why should I even care about astrology? In fact, I'll say this. Radhikesh Prabhu recently did a chart for our daughter Revati as just part of our recent kind of exchanges, and she didn't want to know about it. She's like, I don't want to know about it because then I'm just going to start doing, because it's like predetermined, so I'm going to start doing what my chart says I'm going to be doing. So, but it says here that people who are acting for God are not bound. Can you share some thoughts on that?
So we have our karma and we have our conditioning. When people get at very elevated levels in their spiritual life, they can go beyond their karma and their conditioning to where, like, the effects of other people and health problems and tornadoes and everything else and trouble from the mind doesn't affect them. But those are very elevated levels of existence. Like, there was this amazing story of Haridas Thakur, who was a devotee around 500 years ago. And he, lived a very priestly life, very noble life. And, but people became jealous of him, and somebody sent a prostitute to him to kind of deviate from his path. But he didn't. He stayed, fixed on what he was doing. But that's a very elevated state, and most of us aren't at that point. And what I can tell you is that when we look at most people's astrological charts, what we predict is fairly accurate to what's going on in their life. And I do,
what they're struggling with, and
exactly. And I do these charts every single day, whether it's their health problems or legal problems or problems with the children, with relationships. Just like Jagai mentioned, it noted when he was going to get divorced and all of these things. The chart will be accurate to what's going on. And in people who are devoting their life to serving Vishnu or being spiritual, the chart does also recognize that past life karma is going to come in. So it's basically showing the results of our karma from previously.
Okay, so we've got a doubter in our midst. A doubter has entered the room. Welcome, doubter. Okay, so here's this comment that we got on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that one come up.
Okay, so this guy, Mr. Hari Krishna van der Waals, he first of all, he respectfully calls you boss, which is super cool, super nice. Very humble. And then he says, you say you can, quote unquote, predict death. Stopping fooling the world and yourself, man.
Oh, very nice question. I get doubters all the time. That's not
Tell us.
Unusual, So yes, astrology is a science. So you can use the science of astrology and the things that there's certain subtle things we look for in that, and you can give someone an idea. So it's not a prediction; it's a deduction based on science. So you're not, pulling a number out of somewhere. Oh yeah, you're going to live to be, whatever. It's based on these scientific results, and they're reproducible. If you go to, different astrologers, more than likely in this particular thing, you will get the same answer. So there's no fooling in there. This is something that's very accurate.
So, okay, so let's dig into this a little more. In the chart, you would see patterns. You would see certain confluences of planets that kind of always show up when someone leaves their body. That's a question. That sounded like a statement, but that was a question.
There's many different factors you look at in predicting, this type of thing. So you look at the position of the sun, which represents the body. You look at the position of Saturn, which brings some karma. You look at the 8th house, which represents death. You look at the 12th house, which represents losses in health and things like that. And in all the charts I've done, those numbers, those predictions have been accurate.
Because you can see that even looking at the chart of someone who's passed away, you can actually double check your thing, like, oh, this is when they passed, and you look at the chart and see how that.
Exactly.
So I have a couple of questions, something going through my mind. So let's take a few situations. Let's just say at a hospital, the very same minute, 10 ladies had 10 babies, the same exact hospital room at the same exact minute. They would all have the same chart, right?
That's a question I get all the time, and that's a very good question. So there's not just one chart, right? You have the birth chart, which is the moment they're born. But that birth chart is separated into about 20 different divisional charts that are basically, seconds apart, can make a difference in those divisional charts. And you use those to predict also. So no, two people or twins or, that type of thing, they generally have very completely different karma.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes sense. So I work in the genetics industry. I work for a genetics lab. And a lot of people think that genetics is kind of like astrology in the sense that it can predict, like, if you're going to get cancer and all this stuff. It can't. It could give you suggestions depending on different markers in your DNA. But if your lifestyle is different, then you may not ever be affected by the genetic markers for, let's say, some kind of cancer or Lou Gehrig's disease or whatever. So with astrology, though, there's a question of like this free will that seems to be lost, because if you can from birth predict certain things that are going to happen, well, what if the person becomes a complete jerk in their life and, I don't know, robs banks and stuff, or they become a philanthropist? What's the point? Like, where does free will come into this?
Yes. So astrology, it's very important to know, astrology is not something that's written in stone. It's a very dynamic science. It's a dynamic, changing science in that way. We have predispositions and inclinations to behave in certain ways. Okay. So astrology shows that, okay, this person is likely, they're Brahminically natured, or, they have a nature to be very intelligent or be a leader, or this is someone who just likes to work. This is their predisposition. But certainly those things can change depending on how we react in that situation. So if we have a predisposition to be spiritual and we grow up in that spiritual environment, we're going to be pushed in that direction. But we have a choice at every minute on how we're going to behave. Let me use the example of two people who smoke. Okay, there's one person who smoked for the last 20 years, 2 packs a day, and one who's never smoked.
Yeah.
When they pick up a cigarette, every time you pick up a cigarette, you have a choice. Now, the one who smoked for 20 years, they're going to be much more likely to pick up that cigarette and smoke it. While the one who's never smoked, it's going to take some effort for them to engage in that bad activity. So the inclination is always there, depending on our astrological karma, but the choice is ours on how we're going to react to it. Just like two people, one's an alcoholic and one's never had a drink, and they walk by a bar, the one who's never had a drink could probably go into the bar, walk around, sit down, and never be bothered and walk out of there without taking a drink. While the one who's an alcoholic has to run past that bar as fast as they can because they're going to have the inclination to start drinking again.
This is a super fascinating thing for me because this is this is where I feel like astrology in my heart and kind of my own life intersect. To understand what role I have to play in my own life. So what I mean to say is, in my kind of structure of the universe belief system, understanding, I have a relationship with the divine, who, in my tradition, we call Krishna, So that relationship is a co-creation of God's will and my will. And it's almost like a dance, in the sense that in a dance, there's a structure, but also a partner can make a choice and then the other partner has to respond. And I feel that question around this piece of astrology is probably the most fascinating thing for me. What role do I have to play with my destiny, and how is it impacting the journey of my soul?
So the best way to look at it is that the choices we've made in the past, right? We call it karma, our choices and the results that come from that. The choices we've made in the past are giving us our current life situation. The choices we make now will determine our life in the future. So this is very much essentially karma. So in every situation, we have a choice. We can't always control the situation that we're in. Let me give you an example from my own life. When I was 40 years old, I got diagnosed with a terrible disease that came out of nowhere. I was perfectly healthy, and all of a sudden I got this disease that I knew would, if not be terminal, would cause some great difficulty in my life.
What year was this?
This was 2012.
So you were beginning your study of astrology at that time?
Yes, I was beginning my study of astrology. So then, and medically, as a doctor, I knew, hey, this is bad news. This is a rare disease that 1 in 100,000 people get, and I'm screwed. This is how I feel in many ways.
Is that the clinical term?
I think that was the clinical term I used at the time. Yeah. And I went to see my astrologer, and he said, you know what? This is nothing to worry about. This is going to go away in 5 years. This is some subtle planetary energy. And I said, no, that's impossible. As a physician, I said, that's not possible. This is not what happens. This is a chronic, unrelenting disorder that's going to cause turmoil. Now, 5 years later, it was gone. I can't explain it, but it was gone. But in the moment, I made the choice that I'm going to fully depend on the divine Lord to guide me through what happens in this. And I made the right choice in that situation. And astrologically, the chart, your birth chart, knew that you would choose to respond to this in the proper way. So we can't control the situation that we're in, but we choose how we respond. If we respond to it with acceptance and understanding Krishna or the divine Lord's greater will in our life, and that everything is used for our greater spiritual evolution, then the results, no matter what they are perfect. But yes.
So we got a little question here, but this is from my friend Abhijit Adwaita Hari. So these are kind of things we've been talking about right now. We've touched on some of these things actually. He asked, what if we don't have the exact timing? Can astrology still be helpful?
It can, and I get that a lot. People don't know the exact time they're born. What we generally do, if they can tell me some, major events that took place in their life, when their children were born, when they had a surgery, when some illness happened, when their parents died, when they got married. Then you can kind of go backwards and figure out approximately, or fairly close.
So I guess the more accurate the timing is, the more.
The more accurate the timing, the better. If you don't have it,
you got better data, more data. The more data in the data set.
The more data, the better.
So okay, so wait, before Jagai asks a question, there's a little surprise that Radhikesh and I talked about. So
here we go.
What he was telling me was that you can actually see, for example, here's something we haven't touched on yet. What the heck is going on with the coronavirus, right?
Yes.
And like, for example, India's struggling with the coronavirus. When will it end for India? This like horrible wave that they're going through right now, right? And one of the things that Radhikesh told me is you can create a chart for a country based on when the country was founded. So it's almost like a person's chart. This goes back to the idea we're talking at the beginning, which is a whole other show that we should do about the personification of energies in the universe. But the idea of the personification of a country, that the country has an entity or a soul kind of, and that you're doing the birth chart of a country. I found that very fascinating. So before we get into that, which I think we could get into in a minute, I asked Radhikesh, can you do the birth chart of my podcast?
Yes, we can. You can, any business, you can look at when it's created, and then you can do a podcast based on that.
So a little inside joke, is my podcast going to take sannyas?
It's going to give other people sannyas.
So you did look briefly at my podcast at Sound and Form's chart, right?
That's right.
Okay, tell us a little something. Isn't this cool, Jagai, right?
Yeah.
At the time Sound and Form was, created, and I used the time of 9 a.m. today in Washington, D.C., but if it was created a little earlier, we can adjust that. But based on that, you had Moon and Mars in the first house in the sign of Gemini. So you have Gemini is speaking and communication and talking and knowing things in detail. The Moon is using your mind and emotions. Mars is using electronics and using your hands. So it shows, and using computers. It shows using all of those. Those are all basically forms of communication. Using that communicative energy, this can be very, very successful. But it takes time and it takes effort, and it shows the influence of Jupiter in the 9th house. So Jupiter is the planet of Dharma and spirituality and the guru and teaching. So it shows using your forum to teach other people, or repeat the words of the teachers, it can be very successful.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Ah.
Yeah, very interesting.
So maybe I should go public. Everybody invest in Sound and Form because this ship is sailing.
That's right.
Well, okay, so that's another question, just briefly on this thing. Okay, you had a question, Jagai. Go ahead.
Well, okay, I just wanted to understand your perspective of this, because I heard an analogy by Sadaputa, Richard Thompson, who's passed away, Dr. Richard Thompson.
Yeah, well, Richard Thompson, you can get some great books by him.
Yeah, Cosmography, beautiful book. He used an example that if you're at a factory, let's say you're in a factory and there's 1,000 workers there, and you look at the clock and the big hand and the little hand meet at the 12, and all of a sudden, everybody in the factory goes out. And then now the little hand hits the 1 and the big hand goes around and hits the 12. Then everybody comes back in. So it was lunchtime, obviously. So the question is, did the clock influence them to leave and come back? Or was it a representation of their will to leave and come back at a specific time, which was lunchtime? So when we talk about astrology, is it the influence of the planets on us that's making let's say, the karma happen? Or is it our karma that's manifesting at certain times, and we can see that manifestation through the position of the stars?
So you can look at it either way, but basically what these planetary beings do, what Saturn does and Rahu does, they're bringing us our karma. They're designated to bring that karma into our life. So our karma from our past life or 10 lives ago, if it's meant to manifest in this life, the chart will show that. So, and then, these planetary beings are designated, okay, Saturn, please bring this karma into this particular person's life at this time. So you can look at it either way. The result is basically the same. So we do have some choice in things, but I think a lot of it is that we don't have as much choice in things as we think.
So what about this? What about this thing? Well, actually, let me just take a break to do this. This podcast is sponsored by myself. So if you're interested in getting more connected with me and what I do, please check out patreon.com/Gaura Vani and support the revolution, the spiritual sonic revolution. Many of you know me as a musician, and please be part of helping the music happen. Please check out what is Radhikesh. Give me where you want folks to go to check out more stuff about you.
Absolutely. You can, I'm on Instagram and YouTube, Radhikesh Das. My website is radhikeshdas.com. And they can, leave a message on any of that.
Das or Dasa?
Das, Radhikesh Das, D-A-S.
All right. Radhikesh Das. Did I spell that right?
Yes.
And Jagai, I know you created a TikTok sensation going on right now. You want to give me that information?
Sure. If you're on TikTok, come check us out, me out. We do Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, kind of feisty discussions in the comments. And my TikTok is Jagai Nitai. That's it. One word. @Jagai Nitai. And you can find me over on TikTok. Try to do Gita verses, only reading the Sanskrit, really just kind of digging into bringing out a lot of questions. There's a lot of young Hindus and atheists and such that want to argue, and so it's a fun space.
Nice. So, real practical here. I love the point that you just made, Radhikesh, about that usually we don't have as much control as we think we do over what's happening around us. Yeah. I've heard the example given that from the Mahabharata, that a chariot with two wheels, one is our action and one is destiny, and it's like how much, if one wheel's turning at a specific rate, how much can you change the direction of your vehicle, So just for a second, at least, it would be nice to talk about this. Before we go, we have some other questions popping up. So before we go into the kind of the last questions, and I don't say this in a flippant way at all. I don't say this in a silly way or any sort of I know the title of this thing seemed a little clickbaity, science or fraud, but it was really at the heart of the thing is, how do we learn to trust these ancient sciences in a way that makes sense in our lives? So, sure. So the question is, here's the question. What the heck is going on with the planet right now? Like, holy mazzoli. Everyone's arguing with each other. There's this coronavirus. People are like in the streets protesting, for equity and race, for financial equity in international it's like, and then even communities are being torn apart by something as simple as like, do you put a piece of cloth on your face or not? Do you listen to your doctor and get a vaccination or not? Like, it's like, holy moly. So what the heck is going on? And when will we get some relief?
This is a very good question. I actually did a post on coronavirus in India and when it's going to get better, maybe last week on Instagram. So this is a lot of planetary karma coming out for everyone. There's individual birth charts, and then, there's the transits of the planets, which affect the planet as a whole, and then different countries. So there's this Saturn-Jupiter influence going on, and Saturn's, a strong planet bringing us our karma, and it's weakened Jupiter in the process at some point. So this coronavirus is going to last for some time. Expect the next 2-3 months in India will probably worsen. Okay, it's not going to get better. They're going to need more help, things like that, and all these other problems that are going on. Expect into next year before coronavirus really calms down. And if you look at different, the different movements and the social issues going on, America is actually going through a Rahu period right now. And Rahu brings chaos on America's birth chart. July 4th, 1776. You look at now, it's going through this crazy Rahu period, and Rahu brings just chaos and turmoil and confusion. But what Rahu leads to is then Jupiter. So for the country as a whole, it's a period of growth.
Wow.
A period of purification. So then when Jupiter eventually comes, Jupiter brings wisdom and knowledge and leadership and a more noble way of living, and the chaos will at some point pass.
So, okay, so that deals with, it's interesting because there's a book that I read recently called We Have Been Harmonized, and it's about the state of the Communist Party in China.
Okay.
And it's talking about how there's kind of an ideological battle on the planet right now between two different forms of government. Authoritarian government, which is not saying like that it's an evil thing, but like an authoritarian person who says, this is what we're doing and everyone's going to go along. And a more democratic or egalitarian one where it's like, we all are figuring this out together. And he was making the point that in the short term, the authoritarian one seems to get better results because it's like you don't have to get approval from anybody. You can just go ahead and get it done. Just make a decision and boom, go on your way.
Right.
But that in the long term, there tends to be disharmony in society. And so he was saying that people who believe in a more democratic perspective on governance, where the people are part of the process, that, or at least considered, people's feelings considered as part of the process. He said it's very important that we step up at this time, that, the world is challenging these forms of more benevolent forms of governance, and that we have to show that it is possible to govern people with kindness, with love, with, encouragement rather than with punishment and some of these other things. So it's interesting for me to hear you say, I personally believe that even the Vedic model of governance, which was monarchy, right? But even the Vedic model of monarchy is actually a form of democracy, in the sense that democracy is a form of that, is what I mean. Because the Brahmanas, which in this conversation, like you're representing a Brahmana, a knowledgeable elder, spiritually elder, someone who holds knowledge and wisdom, is mixing with the people. Right. And gathering information and trying to care for the people, not elitist and apart. But, it's almost like the inverted pyramid, that the Brahmanas at the bottom holding the weight of society with their intellect, dependent on begging, wherever they live, meeting people where they are. And then those Brahmanas advise the rulers, the leaders, because those leaders have that respect for them because of their qualities, So in that sense, I feel like hearing that Jupiter is coming from this period just is quite encouraging to me, because it can be very discouraging at this time, Of
course. Yeah, this is, Rahu brings chaos. Saturn's influence brings chaos. They kind of work together, Saturn and Rahu. And, we wait for those energies to pass, with whether it's with COVID or with, the different social movements that are going on, or with, as you mentioned, all the political
political disagreements and struggles. So, but let's talk about COVID for a second more. You mentioned about this country, and you mentioned that India could get worse before it gets better. But what do you look at when you're looking at the globe? Like, there's no birth chart for the globe. So, like, how do you figure out when the virus is going to pass away?
Right. You look at, the planets are always moving. So you look at the planetary transits that are going on across the world. And and then you can look at it more focused on different countries if you want to, but you look at how the planetary transits are going, and based on those transits, you can make some judgment about that.
Okay, so what's your feeling? When will this thing actually, like, my kids want to know, like, when will we be able to go back to normal?
From everything I'm looking at, it's going to be next year before people are, probably February, March of next year, but it may get worse. It'll likely get worse before it gets better.
Globally,
yes.
Man. Everyone take a deep breath while you can.
We're not out of the woods, put it that way.
That's really interesting. When you know, maybe you don't know, when did America go into the Rahu period?
It was probably, I have to look back now. It's like 2000 and not 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Perhaps a little earlier. So I don't know the exact year now. I'd have to look at it.
So we have, so many beautiful friends here joining in. We got a good question here. As we're wrapping up, we have 5 more minutes of this program before Jagai does the closing dance. You did prepare a closing dance, right, Jagai?
Yeah. Take my shirt off and dance around.
He showed us this crazy video. Jagai, we were preparing for this thing, and Jagai's like, we should do our podcast like this. I'm not even going to tell you what he sent us. It was like Radhikesh Prabhu lost some of his astrological power just watching that video. All right, my friend Pitango, who's a phenomenal artist. He makes these incredible pieces of jewelry. In fact, let me plug my friend Pitango. Check out this bad boy.
That's cool.
You see that Hanuman doing bhajan?
Yeah.
This is from this guy who's just asking this question. He's a fantastic artist. If you ever can buy his jewelry, handmade jewelry. What about if you're a rebellious person that would be unpredictable? Would the chart still be accurate?
Yes. So unpredictability can be seen in the astrological chart. So you can predict unpredictable.
Unpredictable is predictable.
Yeah. So, somebody has a Rahu influence, somebody has a Mars influence. These are people who can be very decisive and very intense and do crazy things sometimes. So yes,
He's talking about you, Pitango.
That's funny. So yeah, you're not really rebellious because it's very predictable.
We knew you were going to be rebellious. No one's surprised.
Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. Okay. Well, there was one other topic that Jagai and I. Oh, here we got his response there. There was one other topic. If anyone else has questions, drop them in the chat. We'd love to put you up there on the screen. There was one other question that Jagai and I had, and I loved your response for this. And maybe we can end with this idea. Actually, after this, I wanted to show the last verse you shared because it was super cool. So here's the question.
And I had one thing I wanted to mention something before.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free. So here's the question. Can you use astrology for bad things, like going in and wiping out someone's business, stock market, or evil purposes? Can I use astrology to conquer the world?
You can go to the dark side of the force. Yes, you certainly can. But it's not something that is wise. Yes, you can use astrology, and there are auspicious days to do evil things. There are auspicious yogas to do evil things. Not something to get involved in.
It's an auspicious day to do an evil thing.
So you can do astrology to find your enemy's weakness and attack them on that particular day and time.
Yes, you can.
But tell me why you don't like doing that.
It's, astrology is a Brahminical service. It's not, an astrologer is someone who's a Brahmin. They live a life, they try to live a life of purity and truthfulness and humility, and understand that everything they have, all the knowledge they have, is an empowerment given to them by God. Their primary job is to use astrology to become an instrument of compassion and kindness in this world. And that does not go along with using it for evil purposes. I'm sure you can find someone out there who'll help you in that regard, but I stay away from that. I'll stay on the Luke Skywalker side, not the Darth Vader side.
Fair enough. So
just before you go off that point,
yeah,
wasn't that part of Sukaracharya's argument for Bali Maharaj, that he saw Vamanadev and could tell that this was the supreme, because being the guru, he could predict what was going to happen, something like that?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So check this out here. I thought this verse was cool. So this is the second one that Radhikesh shared. Well, so those who were expert in astrological knowledge and in performance of the birth ceremony instructed King Yudhisthira about the future history of his child. Then, being sumptuously remunerated, they all returned to their respective homes. So this is also from Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes.
You want to speak on this verse at all, Radhikesh?
Yes, this is just to show that, this science, same as the other one, that these people who do practice astrology in the old days, in the ancient days, and even now, they have this very perfect knowledge. If they continue following the same path of the people that came before them, they can continue with their predictions and using the knowledge in the right way, as was done in the ancient times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really the key, is that you should be following the people who have come before you and not try to change things or deviate from the way you're doing things to satisfy somebody or just for money or for other things. It should be done always in the proper way, and that knowledge will stay with you. And if you do it in the wrong way, the knowledge will disappear.
Well, my feeling is that a good way to end this thing is from this little Sanskrit section, Labda Apachitaya, which is those who had received sumptuous remuneration. So I think we should make sure that everybody sumptuously remunerates Radhikesh for his service to humanity here. And get your chart done. Can you have a pet's chart done?
No, you can't.
Oh man, that would have been, you had so much money right there. You could have crushed it. Man, you should rethink that one. Pet charts. I'm telling you, this is America. Pet dog chart. That would be crucial. You'd make so much money. Oh my God. Who was my cat in his last life?
Can you post where those quotes were for somebody like Margaret and myself? I'd like to go check them out.
Maha, what's up, Maha? So nice to see you up here.
I'm sorry. This is from First Canto, chapter 12, verse 12 and verse 29.
Okay, let me stick that in. Wait, you got to tell me that again. Hold on one second.
Well, if you decide to go evil, Prabhuji, then you do a chart on when we win the lottery. I'll go buy the ticket. We'll split the difference.
There you go.
So wait, Srimad Bhagavatam, what was it?
1:12:12 and 1:12:29.
1:12:12 and 1:12.
29. This is a chapter entitled "The Birth of Maharaj Parikshit."
All right.
This one question, Lisa asks, are there indicators in astrology regarding the demise of Donald Trump?
It's interesting. I did do Donald Trump's chart, but maybe we won't get into that right now. It's a little bit. Yes, I did do his chart, and I actually, right before the election, I predicted that Biden would win, and that's on YouTube and Instagram. But yes, there's issues. He's not going away yet, put it that way.
Yeah, that's my vibe too. That's my vibe too. All right, there's that. But here, one thing that you can do, and I'm not an astrologer, but I can tell you this. One thing you can do to minimize negative influences, wherever they're coming from, is to read Srimad Bhagavatam. So whether this guy is in office, or that gal is in office, or this virus is attacking, or that virus is attacking, we can do certain things to transform our consciousness to be in connection with divine consciousness. And reading scriptures or sacred books, and not just from the Hindu tradition, but any sacred book that's for the purpose of expressing love to God, for the purpose of connecting with God, will transform the consciousness and transform our relationship to our lives. So, and another thing, of course, we all know is chanting. So God's names, repeating God's names, is putting us through the power of sound, right? This is a podcast. So it's all about sound vibration. So sound is so powerful. They say even sometimes that sound is the last sense to leave when somebody is, on their deathbed. So, for us to immerse ourselves in sacred sound, it transforms the world around us. So we can be in the middle of a crisis. We can be in the middle of chaos. But, let's be honest. We all know that at some point, and I don't say this to be morbid, but at some point, we are going to be facing a moment where we're going to die. Like in India 2 years ago, I got attacked by a pack of dogs. And I'll tell you how hard it was to chant while the dogs were attacking me. It's like I'm trying to fight them, but it also, if I'm going to die, I should be chanting. So I'm trying to sing to God while these dogs are attacking me. It is not easy. So when that point comes, we are going to be in that space where we need to cry out, to call out, to be in that divine space. So these things do transform our consciousness, affect us. You know?
Can I add a Bhagavad Gita verse?
Please.
To add to what you were saying there. So chapter 5, text 29, Krishna says, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, the Lord of all planets. Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gatfamam Shantam Richati. So a person in full consciousness of me, of Krishna, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities and the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So Krishna, he's in control of all the planets and demigods. We surrender to him. Yes, our body's going to suffer and joy in this world, and maybe planets will do this and that, but eventually, ultimately, Krishna is the source of our happiness, and we go to him at the end. Haribol.
Haribol.
So we got so many beautiful people saying so many kind things. Thank you all for joining us today. Radhikesh, should say Dr. Radhikesh. I like that. I was also thinking like Dr. Rad. Like, you know, for some people, Radhikesh might be too hard. It's like Dr. Rad. Anyway, you could use that one. It's free.
Thank you.
But you said you wanted to add something else? Do you have any closing words?
Talk about it. No problem.
Okay, good.
I want to give my email address also in case somebody wanted to contact me via email.
Okay. Let me just see. What is she saying here? Hearing is the last sense to go at the time of death. I'm a hospice nurse, by the way. Oh man, thank you, Lisa, for that. Powerful stuff. Shabda Brahman, sacred sound. Another technology, divine technology, ancient technology. All right. So let me put up your email address. It is
yourdestiny108@gmail.com.
yourdestiny108@gmail.com. And there it is. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to go out with a little song. So nice to be with you guys. Thank you so much, Jagai, for being my co-host today. I'm going to try and have different friends on. I'm going to try and have Jagai back again. He's so smart. He knows all kinds of interesting things. And he's like a scientist and a genealogist. A computer programmer. He's a dancer. So
very good dancer.
So I'm just going to, sing a little bit for you guys to close out our time. Thank you all so much. I want to give a special shout out to all of those friends of ours who have been doing these podcasts before us. We're following in your footsteps. That should work. Thank you to all our friends for helping, so many folks, and look forward to seeing you next time on another episode of Sound and Form. Till then, Hari Bol, be safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Hari Bol. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. One of the things I love about astrology is it's this timeless science. And one of the things I love about this wacky gourd instrument called an ektar is it feels timeless. Don't you feel you could have seen this thousands of years ago in the bank of the Ganga? This is probably the instrument that Maharaj Yudhishthir's astrologer was playing, I think, when he was doing his reading. Luckily, Radhikesh was not on the screen, so we can't tell if he's agreeing or disagreeing. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopal Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopal Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopal Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopal Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radhe Shri Radhe O Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time. Haribo. Now there's this awkward moment where I try and find the button to end the broadcast.